Aha. Thank you, Sylvia. I must confess, when Sylvia asked me to talk about the Luopan and said you've got half an hour, I thought, what on earth can I do that might be useful? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt the complete history of the Luopan in half an hour. And what I've found particularly interesting as I've put this show together is as much the rings that have come in and out of favour, the rings that have been dropped, as the rings that we're still using now. So let's go back to the roots. Actually, let's start at somewhere reasonably close to the present time. This is a classical Sanhe Luopan showing rings that have been in favour for probably the last 1,000 years, some of them the last 500 years. Relatively modern as they go. This is an 18-ring one, and it's inscribed on tiger bone wood, which is a special wood. It's now a protected species. It's particularly good because ink doesn't run when you inscribe on it. Here's another 20-ring Luopan. So what is a Luopan? Is it a scientific instrument? Is it a magical tablet? Is it a springboard for the intuition? I propose that it's all three, actually. Okay, let's start with heaven. A Luopan is an instrument for measuring, as an instrument for measuring qi. How do we measure qi? This is what qi actually looks like from the Daoist perspective. This is the space song of the blue sky. This classic diagram from the Tang, the Daoist canon. Excuse me, just an aside on the Daoist canon. It's pretty unique among the sacred texts of the world in that it's ongoing, it's still being added to. I love that about Taoism. So we've got heaven and we've got earth, the dark earth of the great float. And when heaven and earth mingle, we get this, the pattern of change. The Luopan is effectively trying to measure this, trying to turn this into details so that we can make use of it. So, right at the roots of measuring the universe, measuring the world, measuring the cosmos, we've got sundials, we've got gnomons. Classic diagram on the right shows us measuring the spring equinox using a gnomon. This is the very simplest Luopan, if you like, and we could say that all the other Luopan rings represent details, minuscule details of this overall pattern. So when we're looking at the Luopan, we're starting the first reference to something that sounds like a Luopan, or the proto-Luopan, actually comes from the Warring States period, right up here, pretty early on. Fushi's up here before the Shah Dynasty, discovering the early heaven sequence of the Bagua, the 8 trigrams. Da Yu, who found the later heaven sequence, founded the Shah Dynasty. So Feng Shui goes this far back. First proto-Luopan Warring States. First illustration we have is from here, Warring States period. This is a representation of the Big Dipper, Beidou, the Great Ladle, the Great Bear, Ursa Major, surrounded by the 28 lunar mansions. And the 28 lunar mansions, unlike the Western zodiac, which correspond to the plane of the ecliptic, in other words, the Earth, the Sun's apparent path around the Earth, the lunar mansions correspond with the celestial plane of the equator. So it's a slightly different axis. And we actually have the 4 corners of the Big Dipper, as it's represented here, point to the 4 cardinal directions. So this is our earliest illustration of a proto-Luopan. This was found in the tomb of the Marquis Yi of the Zheng, 433 BCE. Moving on in time, Han Dynasty, 5 dynasties, and Liao Dynasty versions of the 28 lunar mansions. So our starting point with the Luopan is really the Big Dipper, and by extension the North Pole, the celestial North Pole. It is said that in Chinese tradition, the celestial North Pole is where the heavenly emperor and empress reside, and the wheeling of the Big Dipper through the seasons of the year issues the edicts of the lords of destiny on earth, the lords of karma, if you will. And it's very much the starting point. So our proto-Luopan begins with the Big Dipper rather than a magnetic compass needle. Excuse me. Here are a few representations of the 28 lunar mansions. This is a Chinese version from a modern Tongshu, and this is a Japanese Buddhist version. So this is introducing the notion that each of these lunar mansions has a quality of energy of its own. So we're talking not just astronomy, we're talking astrology. We're talking direct observational astronomy in using the 28 lunar mansions and the Big Dipper in our earliest proto-Luopan, and we're also looking at meanings derived. Lots of meanings, lots of epithets, elemental natures overriding. The 28 lunar mansions are divided into 4 sevens, each of them presided over by one of the 4 celestial spirits, the Yang, that you'll all know as dragon, tiger, tortoise, phoenix. So this is where these 4 celestial animals are represented on the Luopan, actually. It's in the 28 lunar mansions plate. How many people in this room use a Luopan in practice? That's good. That's great. How many of you use the 28 lunar mansions in practice? Excellent. Okay. There is a thesis that's recently been advanced by Stephen Skinner that I have to adhere to myself, that says that the reason the lunar mansions here's some more details of the luck paths connecting different lunar mansions. There's all sorts of layers of elemental resonances one can look at, as well as, of course, the real movement of especially the Sun and the Moon and the 5 planets through the 28 lunar mansions over the course of a month or a year. Here's some of the details on that. That's found in the blue satchel. Stephen Skinner presents a thesis in his recent book, help me, what's it called? My Guide to the Feng Shui Compass. It came out 3 years ago. Excellent book if you consider yourself a Luopan ring spotter. The scholarly attention to detail is absolutely superb. So the 28 Shu, 28 lunar mansions, are subject to the precession of the equinoxes, just as the Western zodiac is. Most Luopans are dated to 960 CE, the position where the lunar mansions were then. With the precession of the equinoxes, we should be updating our lunar mansions by 1 degree every 71.6 years. This has been done to some extent. Some Luopans have been updated to 1644 or 1860, or even more recently 1984 or 2044. We're currently 30 degrees out from the original Han Dynasty placings, and 14 degrees out from current astronomical reality, if we assume a 1644 Luopan. So Stephen Skinner's, one of the theses he advances in his book, is that we would be using the lunar mansions much more if they were useful, if they were accurate. In other words, if they were up to date, then we'd find them far more accurate in practice. I'll just leave that with you as a thought. It's an easy calculation, of course, to update your Luopan if you can work out exactly where the horn, the first lunar mansion, starts. In the older pans, it's in Chen branch, but it begins along with Chen, dragon of the 24 mountains. But you can do the calculation based on 71.6 years, update your lunar mansions ring, see what the planets are actually doing in the sky today, consulting either probably a Western astronomical almanac would be the best for that. And then you can get an accurate 28 lunar mansions reading. used for timing, but also the appended rings to the lunar mansions will have red dots in them if they're particularly auspicious, and that would be really auspicious sitting position for your chosen site. Yang numbers, auspicious degrees. This is an extraordinary astronomical chart dated 1247. All the so-called astronomical rings, the outer rings of a Luopan, pretty much are represented in this chart. There are actually 1,436 stars in here, mainly Northern Hemisphere stars. The 28 lunar mansions, the Fenye, the 12 provincial divisions, the 12 Jupiter stations, 12 branches, and the Big Dipper handle, Big Dipper right in the middle. The handle in this chart is pointing east, implying midnight on the spring equinox. The concentric central circle is the celestial equator, the non-centered circle is the ecliptic, in other words, the apparent sun's path. So on the outer few rings of your typical Luopan, we have the astronomical plate, which is, of course, should be aligned with astronomic north rather than magnetic north. Sun, Moon, 5 planets, and changing solar terms in the Jupiter station cycle. That's not used terribly much these days. We'll encounter a few rings early on in Luopan history that aren't used very much anymore. Jupiter station cycle. Again, looking at the real positions of the planets as they're passing through these 12 stations gives us the fullest astronomical, astrological meaning. Matching 61 elements. Yeah, this is another astronomical plate. These are the 60 dragons, 60 binomial dragons, related to the astronomical plate, in other words, with the same degrees as the lunar mansions, rather than the much later version. Though actually this is quite a recent ring. Okay, so we've got our 4 celestial spirits. That's what we've learnt so far from way back 300 BC. The Li Ji, the Book of Rites, says, in front there is a red bird, followed by a slow-moving tortoise at the rear. To the left is the Azure Dragon, and to the right, a white tiger. You all know about these, I won't labour the point. Just to say that you don't see them marked out on your typical Luopan, except as represented by the 28 Shu, the 28 lunar mansions. Moving on in time, the next proto-Luopan diagram we find is from the Huainanzi, dated 221 BCE. We've got the translation on the right. And here's the first time we see the branches, the elements, the Sanhe element triangles, the Shu arranged in the same order as are found later on the Luopan. And a little bit later still, this Han Dynasty, Luopan is really the first archaeological remains of a Luopan that we found. We have a central ring, that's the heaven plate, that rotates on a spindle on the outer square earth plate. And you can see in the central heaven plate the Big Dipper, not accurately depicted in this diagram, and the 28 lunar mansions in an early seal script. The earth plate here uses all 10 of the stems and 12 branches, and you notice the doesn't have any trigrams. So by implication, this Luopan, or this Luopan as it's called, includes the knowledge of the Ho-Tu, discovered by Fu Xi, as it appeared on the back of a dragon horse referencing the south, and therefore Qiangua in early heaven, the heavenly version of number. And the Lo Shu, discovered by Da Yu 1,000 years later, on the back of a tortoise, therefore referencing the north, Kungwa in early heaven, so earth. So we have our nice heaven-earth duality represented, first of all, in the Hotu and Loshu diagrams. You're no doubt all familiar with these as the kind of starting point of Daoist cosmology. From them, we get, who have we got here? The 5 elements. 5 elements derives from the Hotu originally. I won't labour the point about the 5 elements. You all know about that. Maybe you don't know that the 10 heavenly stems represent the yin and yang aspects of the 5 elements. So their first derivation is from the Hotu on the left here. The first derivation of the 12 branches is generated from the Loshu. 10 celestial stems. We've got a picture of the agricultural cycle of the year, if you like, the seasonal cycle of the year. From the bud through to fertilization, stems 1 to 10. And again, related elements, natures, yin and yang natures. All this stuff is used in your calculations. I won't bore you with the details of the calculation, because we won't get through this. The 12 earthly branches. Again, another cycle represented. A baby wrapped in swaddling clothes through to a man and woman making love under a roof. So the cycle of birth, growth, death. The stems represent the heavenly cycle relative to the branches, the earthly cycle. All these we've already discovered a couple of hundred years BC on our proto-Luopan, the Shurpan. Again, epithets of the branches. Discovered recently that in the period of history we're talking about in China, rabbits, sheep and pigs didn't exist. So hare, goat and boar are the more accurate animals in that period, just as a little pedantic detail. You'll find this talk is full of pedantic details. Okay, implicit also in all this are the Sanhe, the triple harmony combinations, and the Liuhe, the 6 harmonies, and the Zhongsha, the oppositions, and the Liusha, the 6 oppositions, the whole of Sanhe theory we're already working with in our Shurpan at this period of history. Okay, also the 12 palaces. I wonder how that happened. The 12 palaces, which is another detailed 12-fold cycle of birth, growth, death within Sanhe Feng Shui, is also implicit in this diagram. Onward at a galloping pace, 12 palaces again. We have to stop on this Sunan Luopan for a moment. There was a moment, I think it was only about 50 years ago, when the outer base plate of this Shurpan was discovered in an archaeological site, and along with it fragments of a spoon that weren't magnetic. Because of a reference, an earlier reference to the ladle, the big ladle, being in the center of the Shurpan, an archaeologist assumed that somehow that there was a magnetized lodestone spoon that spun round. This makes no sense in terms of the amount of friction involved in having a complete lodestone spoon spinning round. So it's considered to be an archaeological error. It was actually just a missing central heaven plate is what should have been in the middle here. Lodestone appears a little bit later on as the magnetic compass needle. And it should be said that I think of the 8 Shurpans that have been found in various archaeological tombs in the last 100 years, none of them have had any relationship with spoons, let alone lodestone spoons, except this first one that had a few fragments of a spoon somewhere else in the grave. Onward, the Shurpan, Eastern Jin Dynasty, getting a bit later. This is Stephen Skinner's correction from the original archaeological photograph, because the drawing that has been around has had the Big Dipper wrongly located. So this is re-put to accuracy. Now this is a remarkable piece of kit really, the Luopan, because you can obviously go outside and see where the Big Dipper is at midnight and align your central heaven plate to that. But equally you can go inside and knowing what the month and hour is, you can align your two plates so that the Big Dipper points in the right way without having to go outside or without having to wait till nightfall. So it's a pretty cunning piece of Luopan. So, and it's again to make the point that the earliest Luopans, the Luopan, were actually aligned on the Big Dipper. How am I doing? I'm not going very fast. Okay. One of the rings in that Luopan that's fallen out of favour, the 12 Shen, the 12 monthly Tengming generals. Here's another Luopan from the southern northern dynasties. On this one you see the translation on the right. You see the gates actually spelt out: the Heaven Gate, the Ghost Gate, the Man Gate, the Earth Gate. A relative or a derivation of the Luopan were these Taiyi boards. The Han Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty one, shows 16 Shen, 16 spirits, and 16 provincial divisions. So we're starting to build up a picture of rings coming in, rings with different numbers, different things happening. The 24 mini-seasons, 24 nodes and chi, appear very, very early in writings, but it's about this period they start to appear as a ring on the Luopan. Another derivation from the Luopan is this Qimen Dunjia board. Now this is a modern one. You can't see it terribly well, but there are actually several sliding rings within it, so that here, for example, you use this lever to pull this ring round and then different figures will appear. Not unlike the modern Luopan that Mark Haberlin and Roger Green put together 20 years ago, 15 years ago. This dates back to the Han Dynasty. It's now pretty much used just as a date selection system. Originally, it was full-blown Daoist magic, a hidden gate system that you would use for appearing and disappearing, including appearing and disappearing troops in warfare, with reference to the celestial stem of the moment, the calendrical celestial stem, and using this Qimen Dunjia board. So just a little bit of reminder of the other aspects of Chinese metaphysics in terms of use in warfare, as well as use in Daoist internal arts. Here are the 12 noble Shen of noble spirits of the Liu Ren board. It's pretty rare to see either the monthly general spirits or the noble spirits appear anymore. You'll notice that 4 of the noble spirits in here, Vermilion Bird, White Tiger, Dark Warrior, and what have we lost? Azure Dragon, might sound familiar. Why have these spirit boards disappeared, spirit rings disappeared? The most likely explanation, I believe, comes round about the 1700s in China, when there was a new age of rationalism sweeping the world, as was happening also in Western Europe. And spirits were kind of a bit of out of favour, and they wanted to be seen to be more scientific. So that's open to debate, that point. It's just a proposition, really, a proposal as to why these particular plates are falling out of favour. Onward at a scamper, Huangdi Jiajing earthboards, appearing 415 AD onwards. In here we've got the later heaven Bagua, we've got the 24 mountains appearing for the first time, the Xiang, the 4 spirits with various auspices. We've got the 9 body parts of the dragon, we've got the fates, the Ming of family members or external Ming, And we got 4 gates plus another pair of gates of peace in east 1 and west 1. Here and here. No, here and here. Gates of peace. Put the Ho-Tu, the Lo Shu, and the early and later heaven Baghuas all together, and we get this pretty picture. Baghuas don't appear very important on Luopans until a lot later on. Just a quick look at the early heaven Bagua to remind you about it, and the later heaven Bagua. There is this protocol that, broadly speaking, you use both for everything, but the early heaven Bagua is far more relevant to temple design, to the spiritual planes, to outside and garden design. Later heaven Bagua far more relevant to secular space and interior design. But in fact, if you're going to go the whole hog, you should perceive them both as present everywhere, the early heaven shining through the later heaven. Having said that. Okay, a very quick detail on Bagua. This is the kind of first, almost the only practical bit of Luopan use you'll see in this show. Lost water and death water. You don't want water going through paired gua, early and later heaven. Won't labour that. Let's scamper on to the Tang Dynasty bronze astrological plate. In here we've got the central hollow, which can contain a wet needle. So this is our first representation of moving beyond the Big Dipper for our alignments into using a magnetic needle. Here we've got the back of a mirror in which there's a poem around the outside which praises the mirror's ability to confront the Ling, the spirits, to confront and control the Ling, who are the benevolent spirits, if you like, the early heaven spirits. Its virtue coming from the evening star, Venus, and the white tiger. So a strong reference to Yin, so mastery of the spirits. And here we've got Northern Song Dynasty water compass method. So we've scampered on in time now. And I won't divert more than a moment to mention the whole Shui Peng Ba Jin Fa, the 8 needles of the water compass method, which is a protocol for divining that which is underground. Da Yu issued an edict, which is still effective to this day, I gather, that says no dwelling should be built until the earth has been surveyed to make sure there are no demons within it. So we've got the whole of the underground energies, geopathic stress theory, represented within the heaven pool of the Luopan. Nowadays, since the wet needle was replaced by the dry needle, the Luopan masters, Feng Shui masters, will look at the dipping and trembling movements of the needle to discern underground energies, as well as obviously the rotating to give the whole of directionology. Moving on to compass needles, we've got hanging on a silk thread needle, a variety of methods. Moving through to this rather charming one, this is Song Dynasty. There are 2 rings missing from this archaeological find, but here we've actually got separate rotating rings, which prefigures the Swiss compass by more than 1,000 years. Okay, we have fish-shaped needles, we have tortoise-shaped needles. Up in the Ming Dynasty, we've got another wet needle Luopan. And in this one we see for the first time the 72 mountain penetrating dragons and the Yin-Yang of the 72 dragons. This was brought in by Yang Yun Sung in the 900s, I think. 72 dragons, no, 24 mountains first. 24 mountains I won't labour because I'm about, how much more time have I got after this says stop? It says 13 seconds. Okay. Okay, blah, 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 24 mountains. Relationship with form school. of course, is you don't do the art of numbers, the Liqi school, without reference to the form school. It would be better to talk in terms of form method and compass method and putting them all together. Let me scamper through to an interesting slide to end on. 324 mountain rings. Okay. I'll just give you this one. What's now called the man plate 24 mountain ring was brought in, no, let's start earlier. What's now called the heaven plate of the 24 mountain ring appeared about 900 AD. Yang Yunsong introduced it. And it was then aligned to astronomic north. In other words, he's taking into account the difference between magnetic north and astronomic north, the magnetic deviation. 200 years later, Lai Bu Yi introduces another plate, which he first calls the outer heaven plate. At that moment, again, aligned exactly to astronomic north according to magnetic deviation on the eastern seaboard of China in that period, 1100 AD. Another 100 or 2 years later on, that was no longer accurate. At some point in history, the outer heaven plate, which at that point was aligned with the astronomical plate, is moved in between the earth plate and the heaven plate 24 mountains to become the man plate, and its use becomes something completely different to what Lai Bu Yi intended. So we now have this notion, I mean, scholars are of mixed opinions as to what on earth this business of the 7.5 degree deviation one side or other from the earth plate. But it would appear that originally they were set out to represent astronomic north, to update astronomic north. But since then, they've kind of become embedded in the Luopan as something to do with the heaven chi arrives early, the earth chi arrives late, or the man chi arrives late. So they represent the in-breath, and then the earth plate, and then the out-breath of the site, and the different uses that they have, where the heaven plate is now used for water and stars, and the man plate is used for built local environment to a large extent. So no one knows, the various masters and professors that I've picked their brains over the years, no one is certain. It's certainly something to think about. Let's see what else we've got here. Earth plate, heaven plate. Let's just stop here because I'm well over time now. I'll wrap up by saying the Feng Shui compass, the Luopan, is a work in progress. Rings have come in, rings have come out. Most of the stuff that's going on nowadays in Feng Shui, the San Yuan tradition, is really only 600 or 700 years old in terms of when it appears on Luopans. There have been very recent Luopans that are including separate dials in which you can work out your flying stars, you can work out your 8 mansion systems, you can work out your Dragon Gate systems. You take your choice which rings you use. You take your choice which rings you want to add to your Luopan when you get yours made up, when you become a famous master, or even just for your own pleasure. It's calendrical, it's metaphysical scientific, it's talismanic, and it's also becoming a kind of crib sheet table as well. I give you the beauty of the Luopan, work in progress.